Welcome to class. This week, we're going to talk a little bit about the central thermostat of our bodies and how it relates to our sex hormones. Now, let's think way back to the days when we were in middle school, and we learned about a little organ known as the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is essentially the feedback system in the human body. As human beings, our bodies prefer to exist in a state of regulation. Whenever there's something that goes up, the body understands that it should come back down. There are different chemicals, hormones, effector organs that can impact the way that our body releases and then decreases certain hormones throughout our system. Now, today specifically, we're not going to get into advanced neurophysiology, but what we will do is discuss a little bit of the basics of the sex hormones that exist in male and female bodies. Now, I've mentioned this before, and I'll say it again. There are variations in terms of intersex people as well, who may have varying degrees of hormonal involvement, differences in terms of their chemistry, their target organs. For the sake of ease and clarity, we're going to stick to simply the ovaries and the testes. So the first thing that happens in our brains is the hypothalamus releases a chemical known as gonadotropin-releasing hormone, which will then stimulate the pituitary gland. The pituitary looks kind of like a boxing punching bag, and it sits within the sella turcica of the brain. There are technically two parts to the pituitary gland that are important: the anterior pituitary and the posterior pituitary. Now, back in my days of graduate school, I had to memorize exactly which chemicals were released from every single portion. I'm not going to make you learn that. For your purposes, I just want you to understand that pituitary function is highly correlated with things like your hormonal balance. So when you hear things, for instance, like early hormone, excess growth hormone, all of these different factors that come into play with people as they age, sometimes even starting in childhood, a lot of it may have to do with the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is responsible for releasing two different chemicals. These hormones are known as luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone. Now, depending on whether you are a male or female, there's two different things that would happen. The first pathway in men is that the LH and FSH would stimulate testosterone production in the testes. Now, fun fact, testosterone is not exclusive to men. Even though we discuss testosterone often as a masculine sort of hormone, we talk about it in men. We always hear men talking about wanting to boost their T and elevate their testosterone levels. Testosterone exists in both men and women. LH and FSH will trigger the ovaries to produce estrogen and progesterone. And these levels will vary during different portions of the menstrual cycle, which we'll discuss at a later date. Now, the interesting part is the ovaries are then responsible for creating testosterone within the female system. So even though we tend to associate testosterone with things like masculinity, things such as skeletal muscle growth and your libido are correlated with your testosterone levels. And this is true in both the male and female. That all being said, any variation in these sort of hormones can lead to different shifts in how you feel. So the neurochemical and hormonal homeostasis, essentially, your balance, can often lead to different symptoms showing up as a physical person. Your hormonal health has a massive impact on everything that has to do with your sexual health. For starters, in females, progesterone and estrogen levels will indicate when they receive a menstrual period. The menstrual cycle is typically approximately 28 days in the average woman, lasting from 3 to 7 days. Now, in persons who get a period, there can be a massive range of things like how heavy the flow is, what sort of symptoms they experience, whether they have premenstrual issues that may arise. And oftentimes, a lot of these issues can stem from varying hormone shifts within the body. Likewise, in the male body, testosterone is what's responsible for sperm production. When sperm is produced, typically it is ejaculated through ejaculate and then will continuously be created, unlike a female menstrual cycle, where one ovum typically is released throughout the course of a month during ovulation. Sperm is essentially created continuously on a loop. Now, that all being said, there are some factors that can come into play in terms of your own health and your hormonal health, such as diet, exercise, sleep quality, lifestyle choices. All of these things can impact the levels of your hormones, and you can see a massive difference in how you feel, not only physically, in terms of fatigue, in terms of physical limitations, but also in terms of libido. Because there's one thing about hormones that's consistently true. Your hormone health is an indicator of how your sexual desire will showcase. Now, you may be sitting here asking yourself, Sonia, we were here for the spicy content. We wanted to learn about the bow chicka wow wow. We wanted to know how to make somebody come. We wanted to learn how to give a good blowjob. We wanted to learn, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Listen, whatever your kink, your fetish, the yum to your yuck, that part we're going to get to. But for now, it's excruciatingly important that we understand the basics of how the human physiology works before we can get into the physical, mental, spiritual, emotional elements of having great sex. I hope you understand that understanding this part and knowing what the basics are will allow you to not only become a better person, it'll make you a better lover. It'll make you more understanding of the people that you're dealing with. It'll help you recognize your own body and when you feel like something may or may not be off. Now, that all being said, next week we're going to start to discuss things that are a little more salient, probably more pertinent to what you have in mind. So stick around and stay tuned. Thank you, as always, for Schooling with Sonia. And for all of you who subscribed, I so appreciate your support, and I look forward to having you here in class for the foreseeable future.